First of all, welcome everyone. And Brian has already told me this is supposed to be fun, so I should probably leave the room. He's like, we're going to have fun. I'm like, okay, maybe. We have not done this presentation together, so you're going to see a going back and forth, and then to give you fair warning. I do not follow a PowerPoint route at all. So if you're thinking I'm going to say anything relevant or remotely related to what's on the slide, that's not going to happen. I have something in front of me to try and keep me scripted, but I don't do very well with the script. So it'll be backdrop, and it should be for information to add on or supplement what I'm saying, but it may not be related to the current strain or thread going through my head at the moment. In addition to Helios Education's Foundation's work on build and value of the Sun United Way's contribution, the Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust and Miriam Cracchiola at Steele are the key investors in this with us. I looked at Marilyn when she walked in the room and I said, do you not have enough of this? Why are you absolutely sitting here?
I just figure out what's going on when I come to her presentation.
So I wanted to acknowledge the work and the support that you have given over the past 2.5 years. And then the PowerPoint presentation is, we'd like to get through it before any questions may arise, but if you just have something that's not allowing you to think anything further and you can't go on, please do not hold it. Go ahead and raise your hand and we'll take the questions as they come up. But we'd like this to be as interactive as possible. We're excited to have all of you here and to share the work that's been going on today. It's just a great opportunity and high time. So with that, Brian, do you want to do slides?
Do you want me to click?
Well, I'm kind of worried about that, but okay. Yes, we're good. So why invest in early childhood? From a philanthropic point of view, I'm going to talk about that at a later slide, but certainly out in the field we talk about the issue of brain development. We acknowledge that about age 5, 80% of a child's brain has already had some of the hard wiring done. And so you've heard a lot about, let's go ahead and provide foundational knowledge rather than going in at later years and doing remediation. It also is really the foundation for lifelong learning. When you look at some of the issues around education and the topic of education reform right now, and you look at the topic of Common Core and you talk about assessment, there's a lot of work and learning that goes on before the kindergarten years. And once that accountability starts taking place, a lot of our children are stereotyped in a very unique way. Do you hear phone?
No, I don't think you're ringing.
Well, see, I have a doorbell, so I'm kind of concerned that no, it's not. So that's another key piece. In the area of longitudinal research, we recognize the importance as funders and using data to inform our impacts and our decisions and how we invest. And then the return on investment. There are a number of studies that have been done, certainly Absidarian and the Perry Preschool Project, which over a course of years and then going back and really looking at those children as they've grown into adults, show a return on investment of $1 to a $17 return. And this is really exceptional when you look at some of the other social programs that we have today. So the early childhood system, it was launched in 2000, the BUILD initiative was launched in 2002 by the Early Childhood Funders Collaborative. And this Funders Collaborative is really made up of a series of funding partners, including Annie E. Casey, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Birth to 5 Policy Alliance, Irving Harris Foundation, Heinz Endowments, Kresge, and McCormick Foundation, to just name a few. And the reasoning that they put this together was to help states construct a coordinated system of programs, policies, and services that would respond to the needs of young children and their families. And what we're talking about here is we may have a number of programs focused on children from birth to age 8, but are they aligned? Do they recognize how they could be working together? Is there a system of alignment of standards and curriculum and outcomes that would allow for a seamless transition of that family? not only amongst programs identified for early childhood, but from early childhood to K-12.
So from an Arizona perspective, and certainly from a Valley of the Sun United Way perspective, we were very interested in this idea that you would take what has been around for a while. I mean, Valley of the Sun was funding Phoenix Day in 1925. But that really these education system in high schools, when you look at systems, these edifices have been around 100, some for hundreds of years, some for 80 years. But in early childhood, there was never really a coordinated way of looking at it. We knew that because we were investing in programs, we were doing a lot. We had Success by 6. We knew the importance of early childhood, but there really wasn't an ability to tie it together. So this alignment was really critical for us. And having the School Readiness Board of the governor and Emerge helped start that systemic conversation. And then certainly the emergence of First Things First. So from a funder perspective, United Way, who has been in this for a long time, we were excited about this idea that there could or should be a coordinated system, and BUILD was a process and an asset to use to help guide our creating that framework here.
So, okay. So why go ahead and focus on system building? I can speak to it from Helios Education Foundation's perspective, but one of the things that BUILD does is provide a framework for conversation. And as Brian alluded to, we've done a lot of work over the course of the last decade, if not the last 2 decades, in early childhood education. There have been numerous action plans and identifiers on how we can go ahead and create key programs and alignment of school readiness plans focused on community, focused on teachers, but there hasn't been a real identity where people can find their place, where people can find their role in a birth to 8 system. So if you think about what it really is and you look at it from that perspective, it's an opportunity for individuals interested in early childhood education to say, it makes sense for me to fund these particular programs or align in this particular way, because we will be contributing to the early grade success of young children by aligning and creating some synergy between what is out there and what we will find as in the way of gaps in the early childhood system. From a Helios perspective, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. We had an opportunity early on to do some funding in Florida and around early childhood education, and we implemented a cluster evaluation of 3 grantees. And with those 3 grantees, they were all focused on the improvement of teacher quality around language acquisition and literacy, not only for the teacher themselves, but for the children in their care. And we looked at 3 different programs focused on centers and homes, and sometimes centers alone and homes alone. And we used 3 different organizations to provide the professional development, some of which included community college, some of which had universities, some of which used 0 to 3 curriculum, and others which used a blending of validated curricula. We use tools as far as validated tools, as far as quantitative data collection, and we use qualitative data collection in the form of focus groups, surveys, and one-on-one meetings. What we were looking for in the way of finding out was, did we have an impact in the field of early education based on our funding of these grantees? Did we change at all the professional development within an organization? And was there replicability or scalability based on our granting of these 3 grantees in Florida? And what we became very aware of was programmatic funding, even with a number of partners where they don't see themselves aligned to anyone, was not giving us sustainability. and it was reducing the impact that we were able to have as a funding organization. Because the funding came, the funding went, and people did not see themselves connected to an existing infrastructure in any way. So we started looking at it very differently. We started looking at, what if we asked the question of, if you're providing pre-K services or if you're providing birth to 3 services, how do you see yourself as part of that infrastructure? How do you see yourself connected to who's down the pipeline on a birth to 8 continuum and who's up the pipeline on a birth to 8 continuum? And then as you're out there, the data that's being collected in the area of your grant, how are you using that to inform the funder as to what services, programs, issues may be identified that would allow you to have better success? And based on that information coming in over a course of 2.5 years, we moved from a programmatic funding model in early childhood education to more of a collective impact model, which the BUILD initiative, based on some of the original work that Piper Helios and Still did with a readiness assessment, really meshed well in informing us that this is an opportune time, that there's a window of opportunity right now to begin to show alignment, to allow people to identify their roles, their responsibilities, and see where they fit and get greater impact and begin to leverage funding. There we go. So when we talk about the elements of an early childhood system, the comprehensiveness really focuses on 3 ovals: early learning and development, family leadership and support, and health, all for the purpose of having children do well and having families have the resources they need to have their children do well. When we talk about the actual functions of the system, we initially look at how to define and coordinate leadership. Strategically, so we're leveraging existing funding or identifying new funding, enhancing and aligning standards not only amongst early childhood ed, but between pre-K and K1, 2, 3, creating and supporting improvement strategies, ensuring accountability so that we have common metrics that we're using, we're all speaking the same language, even though we allow for uniqueness of the communities to identify service providers, we're still saying we need to have a common goal. We need to identify common metrics. How can we go ahead and do that? To recruit and engage stakeholders, and we have done this, and we'll let Brian speak a little bit about that with the development of our steering committee.
Yeah, so is everyone having fun yet? This is like, it did it by itself.
It just moves, it's magic. It moves off your,
Where are you
So
from, Brian?
what got really fun was the amount of time we had to spend in looking at this statewide, and the lists and lists and lists of individuals that we had to create that represented the state, and then going about inviting them to participate in this really large effort to think beyond what's happening today and being aspirational on what could be tomorrow. And really focusing, and some of those individuals it was not difficult to get. But we really wanted to engage political and business leadership in this effort. So we all work with each other. We work with the choir a lot in early childhood. The pieces that we're missing, we're working with other stakeholders, not your usual suspects. And this idea that BUILD actually was going to do something that hadn't happened before, and that is the tie, 0 to 8. It is the tie to the K-12 system. For a long time, the state, even in, while we stand on the shoulders of others, because there's been a lot of foundational work and platforms that we're building on with BUILD, for a long time those 2 systems have sat separate and have been thought of separate. And so we saw it as an advantage to bring individuals, leaders, superintendents, business leaders to see that connection. Jim was talking about the cradle to career. Well, BUILD is really fundamentally changing the mindset on why early childhood education is so critical to K-12 success and onward. And so that tie was really important. So we went through lists and lists and lists, and it took us easily 3 to 4 months just to connect and get the right people in the right community connecting with the right individual to serve on the build, and then do an orientation and get from there.
And we've got some descriptions of that coming up, Brian.
So, but it was very painstaking, but very intentional in terms of really bringing the business community. And I would say, at this stage, we're not happy yet with the full outcome of that. There's a lot more work to be done in bringing the business community into the work, but I can tell you, they're really having an impact on thinking about this systems work differently. The other thing I really want to underscore is the amount of work that First Things First has done in really identifying key components of a strong early childhood system. So again, we're building on much work that had been done before, and we're moving it into a larger conversation, because we were always concerned that people would go, First Things First exists, we're done, we don't have to do anything more. And we all know that the capacity for First Things First to deal with all of the systems pieces, other state agencies, funding requirements, etc., they don't have all that capacity, so we have to do more than that. So weaving that together has been really important.
When we talk about elements of a system, we use a framework that Bill has provided us with, and we're looking at contextual elements, the components. What are the components of the early childhood system? Where do we see connections? What is the existing infrastructure? We talk a lot about reports and task force that have come before us. We talk about the work of First Things First. There's good and bad when you have a key initiative that has specific or designated funding come in. People feel that the work has been done, that it's been identified, that it already is taken care of, and they move on to something else. First Things First was always meant to add to or enhance the quality of an existing infrastructure. And in our state, over the course of the last few years, the foundational infrastructure has been somewhat systemically taken away. And so First Things First has the dubious task of trying to build or add to quality on a very unstable infrastructure. And that's part of the work that Bill is doing, is to stabilize that infrastructure and continue the work in elevating quality. And then we always talk about scale. We talk about a lot of pilot projects, a lot of different grantees, but none of them ever go to scale. So Bill's helping us identify what works, what creates the most impact, what gets us the best outcomes, and what leads us to the ability to scale up. When we talk about Arizona's early childhood vision, it really is this looking at children being successful by the time...
I thought they were chopping the building down.
by the time they are 8, and how can we develop a system that will support not only the children but their families in creating that big success. Brian likes the honeycomb, and the honeycomb really is this identification of what we are currently working on. We're looking at healthy births and development. We're looking at engaged and supported families. We're looking to improve the quality of existing early education and add to the number of high-quality early education sites. We're talking about high-quality full-day K and the continuity between early childhood ed and K-3. And really there's an opportunity right now, again with Common Core, the additional rigor and the accountability beginning at kindergarten, to have a very common sense conversation about what works, what's important, and the resources available to our children prior to kindergarten. And then what do we have as an effective workforce? For just a moment, if you think about the K-12 system, it's primarily taxpayer-based. In the area of early childhood, it's a set of small businesses that operate on parent pay. There's not a lot of consistency, there's not a lot of individuality going out and monitoring for quality. It mostly is safety and health type of features. So we are working to provide the equitable situation for all children to have access to high quality that allows them to have uniform standards and curricula. So what have we done to date? Early on, the three foundations, Piper, Steele, and Helios, conducted a statewide readiness assessment to say, are we really at the stage where we want to have this conversation? It came back very clear that this was a necessary item to move forward to, and it really gave us an opportunity to identify our next steps. We developed a guiding charter document. We identified a chair and our steering committee members, as Brian alluded to. We created a group of 8 co-chairs and engaged over 50 individuals representing 30 organizations and entities in the 5 work groups, focused on some of those key ovals that you saw in that one diagram. We identified initial priority areas for the work groups, and we are also working on a clear theory of change and framework for the initiative work. When we talk about this, I wanted to say that it's been messy. It's been extremely messy, and it's been extremely challenging. We talk a lot sometimes about semantics or lexicon, but it is extremely important that everyone understands what you mean when you say collective impact or collaboration, or that you're part of a group working towards a specific outcome. It's hard for people to let go. It's hard for people to not come to a meeting such as the one you're at today, and those individuals working on the collective impact being assigned as the system builders. What needs to happen is individuals sitting around the table representing DES, DHS, healthcare groups, educators in general, philanthropic organizations, nonprofit, etc., need to begin to internalize that systems approach within their own organization, and to say, how can I align internally, which then leads to better external alignment. And that process from the beginning has been a stumbling block. We thought we were all on the same page. We had conducted a readiness assessment, and when we went out to build the design of what Arizona needed, we needed to step back and say, we will use historical documents, we will use those as foundational pieces, but one entity in Arizona can't have the lead. This really needs to be all people in the boat rowing together, and that we will not specifically point to one entity as being the lead on this issue. It has caused some unsureness. It has created redefining and restating our purpose, and it specifically created the steering committee and the alignment and the engagement of unlikely messengers, and the thinking around adding additional business members to our steering group and not having so many members of the choir that had taken place over the last few years. Because even though we would wish that they would come with a new agenda, they come with the same agenda. And that same agenda has caused us to stall in the past. So we've added GPL, GPEC, the chambers, we've added individual groups and other business leaders, which they didn't have an understanding, which has caused us to clarify and restate and become very succinct in how we're moving this forward.
And I think, you know, there was initial resistance. I mean, it was pretty courageous for the foundations to come together and say, we need to look at the early childhood system with more than the way we're looking at it today. And that's hard when you have people who've toiled for decades in a starved, under-resourced, high-demand system. And it was during the Great Recession. So you can imagine the pressure for each of those entities that were asked to be open to this concept and be open to thinking about building an early childhood system differently than what we have. That was hard, and the first year, I mean, the first year was brutal. And I give great credit to Karen and Marilee for keeping at it. And it's not brutal because people were being untoward. It was brutal because this is new. This is a new way of going about this work, because everyone's point of view, their passion, everything that they do, it was about how to slightly move it so that it's fitting and aligning in a different way. And it's so easy to walk into these meetings thinking that way when you come in the door. And then when you start hearing the conversation about those things that touch up against your programmatic efforts, it becomes really hard. And having Merle Washer, our CEO, and those business leaders come into the room really helped change the conversation from what it would be if the choir, if we were all getting together and having a conversation around the system. And that's been really a big plus in moving the work forward. We are making progress in that. And it is a lot of shifting behavior and paradigms in our head. And we're constantly saying, geez, are we creating an edifice that's just going to take us to the same spot we were, or are we thinking outside? We're constantly asking ourselves that question. What's been great is seeing over the last 6, 9, 10 months the shift, the change around being more open and thinking about building a system.
So Brian mentioned before this vast array of people that are involved in this process. And you can see from this slide that we've tried to think broadly on a statewide basis, that we've tried to add individuals that absolutely need to be there because they have an integral role in system building, and then to bring individuals in to help us think differently, to do that culture of change and how we approach the issue of development of an early childhood system. At the steering committee level, we changed it up to really say we have to have a broader conversation than the usual conversation going on in the early childhood community. But we realized in order to get the work done that we had to have those content specialists focused on specific areas, aligning with those initial ovals that we showed you in that beginning slide. So we developed a quality early learning group and a children's health group. And they are really focused on those items up there, for instance, increasing access to high quality early learning and expanding access to early intervention services for all children, as well as how nutrition and obesity play a role. And I know, Kim, you're here as well, and I think you've participated in some of those conversations. Our next area of focus was early grade success, and then professional development really threads through everything. So if you're looking at the development of an early childhood system, it's no longer pointing out that we have early childhood education in K-12. We wanted to say that when we talk about education, it definitely begins at birth, and in order to do this, we have to show this alignment and this easy transition from pre-K to K-3. So the early grade success group talks about how and what right now is opportune for us to elevate the conversation and importance and the recognition of early childhood ed, but to show how it absolutely is validated based on our conversation on Common Core and assessments. And then certainly when we talk about the third grade testing, how can we have more children be successful at third grade on our AIMS test, specifically also recognizing the importance of early literacy. In professional development, we're not just looking at a conversation around birth to 5 teachers. We're talking about the development, the early childhood development knowledge needs to move into K1, 2, 3, and that we need to go beyond the early childhood workforce, because when we talk about a system, it doesn't just look at the cognitive piece of the child. It's looking at the social-emotional, which includes the mental health as well, and we're looking at creating opportunities to engage the health workers. So professional development in the area of pediatricians, occupational therapists, speech therapists, etc., all focused on engaging that parent and working with that child to create the best outcome. We recognize physical health and social-emotional health as a key component to early grade success.
So let me just add that First Things First was moving on the professional development trajectory. And as a result of Build said, let's fold that in. Let's make this more than what First Things First is doing. So they played a critical role. And then by folding that in and thinking about the broader systems, the group Build is now moving that forward, and the benefits to First Things First to the rest of the community will inure from that, differently than if just the group of First Things First was looking at it.
And another model that Brian just identified, in the area of birth to 3, we clearly can see the importance and the linkage of 3 and 4-year-olds to the K-12 system, but when you drop further down the continuum, that is a little bit harder, a little bit murkier. The Department of Health Services has a home visitation grant from the feds. And this was an area that we constantly were struggling to find additional providers or leverage funding. They are now operating under the Build system as well. They are using their federal funds to leverage some local and regional programs. They are focusing on going in and doing home visitation, recognizing that they're playing an important role in informing the parents and beginning to really identify what needs and gaps may exist for those families in the area of birth to 3. And then that will kind of roll up into the work that we're currently doing. We have a communications and engagement group, and for those of you sitting around the table, you may think, oh my God, not another group. It really isn't meant to add something additional to it, but it's meant to bring those groups that are working on it, such as Spicker, Arizona First Things First, Children's Action Alliance, etc., to the table, because a lot of those conversations that had been going on were really focused on education reform, or K-12, but they were missing the key component of early childhood ed. So the Build initiative is really formulating information and sharing that information to provide this continuum of messaging going from birth through age 8.
So, and do they have this?
They have
this
that.
is an example.
Next steps. So where are we and what can you expect kind of coming out? Out of our work groups, we definitely felt that we needed to level set the conversation around quality, around health, around early grade success. So we are in the process of developing briefs, outlining our key priority issues and recommendations, and incremental steps for system building. The reason it says incremental steps is we have committed to continuing this work in perpetuity almost. We recognize the importance of the development of a coordinated system to create positive outcomes, not just at age 8, but for workforce development and success through career and higher ed. And this gives us an opportunity to take initially a bite out of the system. Because if you have something as massive of birth through 8, a lot of people glaze over and they're thinking it's way too big, I can't do it. So we're identifying some opportunities right now that we'll take on, and then we're showing in our work plan how we will address the continuing issues as we move forward throughout the years. There's a unified agenda based on the recommendations of the work groups, and we're establishing a 5-year work plan with common metrics of our progress. Looking at roles and responsibilities of leadership for the next steps. This is leadership in existing organizations and it's the development of new leaderships. We recognize that we can't go in and change a culture of DES or DHS, but we can work with specific departments and organizations that will allow us to align better and create more leveraging opportunities. The identification of additional resources to support the implementation of proposed steps. There's an opportunity for us to really begin to do demonstration projects to say, based on the data coming in from the work that Build is doing, what do we need? What are we missing? Do we have too many early childhood programs focused on X and X? Do we need to spread that out? Do we need to look at it differently? How can we approach this to make the most sense out of it? And then this champion building strategy. Sometimes you can get a little bit cynical and you can kind of poo-poo the work that's been going on. But at our last meeting, we really focused on the development of this workforce initiative. And it was absolutely amazing to see the individuals sitting around the table who have a strong business background welcome this idea and say, we would love to be able to be more articulate and to take this out and to work with you on key policy and advocacy issues. And so we are really moving that simultaneously with the programmatic elements of BUILD. I mentioned initially the challenges. When we talk about it, it's a system of systems. There's no clear, Brian did a drawing the other day. I'm always saying, what are we going to measure success? And he says you measure success on a straight arrow when really it's this mess of convoluted
But it ends up going up, but it goes like this.
And that's the early childhood system. It really is a mixture of existing systems with different funding streams and requirements. Federally, locally, regionally, no one has really outlined where we're going and mapped to what purpose and end goal. There is no overarching governing body that oversees early childhood. You may be thinking, well, what about First Things First? Yep, there's the Early Childhood and Development and Health Board, but guess what? They've got their statute requirements of what they are specifically to do, and there is no way in the world that First Things First can take on the magnitude of the system. They provide insight, they provide leadership, they provide guidance, and they certainly are working with 31 regional partnership councils. But they've been very supportive in recognizing that they're a valued component of the system, but we need to build beyond and over and above. It's a complicated landscape of programs and services, and our state is very diverse in geography and populations, and we love that. And that love creates uniqueness. So you can't just take an existing system and drop it into Arizona. It's not well received. So we are moving methodically through the work of developing an early childhood system, and we have had some initial successes. We've developed this broad base of partners, including the unusual champions. We are really making headway in linkages between 0 to 5 and K-12. We are having conversations and developing strategies around the essential system functions in that one slide that I identified, specifically around coordination and alignment. And we are being recognized as a partnership and a viable entity in the community.
And it just, for me, just from my little perch and little participation, to see business leaders now talking about early childhood in very powerful different ways than they used to have the chamber actually talking about Medicaid expansion. And it's not just the employment side of what it is, but it's kids care. It's those other elements and the amount of knowledge and understanding that now is occurring in a different way. Has been it's great for me to see some of our business leaders actually walking the talk, and that Tom Franz with GPL, who I've known for a long time, always understood early childhood, but it was the small P in the P, preschool and that is, it's a much bigger part now of this conversation, and I think those are some of the changes that we expect to see. I think we're very early on in the advocacy side, but we're seeing a willingness by the CEO of Desert Schools Credit Union, large organization, wanting to go down and brief legislators around why an early childhood system is appropriate, and getting the right messages to those legislators. And so it's gonna be a work in progress. We've got a ways to go.
We do. So this is really the opportunity to ask questions. We leave you kind of with these 3 bullets. There's an opportunity for all of us to simply ask some intentional questions around, you know, where do we see ourselves? How can we play a role in working with grantees or community organizations on integrating them into a system build? And then there's an opportunity also for you to participate